On a quiet beach, a lone German shepherd stood motionless. One day passed, then two, then three. He never moved, his eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for someone who never came back. People tried to help him, but he refused to leave. And then, on the fourth day, something happened, something no one could have predicted. Stay until the end, because this story will change the way you see loyalty forever. The sun was already high in the sky when the first beachgoers arrived that morning. The scent of salt filled the air, blending with the sound of waves rolling gently onto the shore. Seagulls flew overhead, diving toward the water in search of breakfast, while children laughed as they ran along the sand. But amidst the lively atmosphere, one thing stood out: a lone German shepherd sitting near the water's edge. The dog wasn't playing. He wasn't searching for food. He wasn't interacting with anyone. He just sat there, staring out at the ocean. His deep brown eyes were fixed on the horizon, unwavering, as if he were waiting for something or someone. People walked past him. Some stopped to watch. A few tried to call him over, offering bits of food or gentle encouragement. But he didn't move. His ears twitched slightly at their voices, but his gaze never strayed from the sea. "Is he lost?" a woman asked a nearby vendor. "I don't know," the man shrugged. "I've seen him here since yesterday morning. Poor thing hasn't moved much. Looks like he's waiting for someone." Hours passed, and the dog remained in the same spot. The sun began to set, casting shades of orange and purple across the sky, and still, he did not leave. When the beach emptied and the night grew cold, he curled up in the sand. But even as he slept, his body remained tense, his ears perked for any sound. He was waiting. The next morning, the dog was still there. Word had started to spread. Beachgoers noticed him immediately, whispering among themselves. A young couple tried to give him water. He drank just enough to quench his thirst, then returned to his watch. "Why won't he leave?" someone murmured. "It's like he's expecting someone to come back," another replied. By the third day, the locals had grown concerned. The German shepherd was thin, but not starving. He had clearly been cared for before. His coat was clean, his posture strong, but his eyes carried a sadness no one could ignore. That morning, a man named Ethan, who took his daily jog along the shore, noticed the dog. At first, he assumed it was just another stray, but something about the dog's stillness unsettled him. He slowed his pace, stopping a few feet away. The dog barely acknowledged him. Ethan crouched down, resting his arms on his knees. "Who are you waiting for, buddy?" he murmured. For the first time, the dog turned his head slightly, just enough to glance at him. Their eyes met. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. There was something in those eyes: pain, longing, and something deeper, hope. Ethan knew in that moment that this was no ordinary stray. This dog had a story, and he was determined to find out what it was. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the dog. The moment their eyes met, something inside him stirred, a deep sense of responsibility. As if the German shepherd was silently asking for help, but too proud to beg. That afternoon, Ethan returned to the beach, this time carrying a bottle of water, a small bowl, and some leftover grilled chicken from his lunch. The dog was exactly where he had been that morning, unmoved, unwavering, unbreakable. Ethan approached slowly, careful not to startle him. He knelt down a few feet away and gently placed the food and water on the sand. "You have to eat, buddy," he said softly. The dog turned his head slightly, his deep brown eyes flickering with uncertainty. He sniffed the air, but didn't move closer. Ethan waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the German shepherd took a cautious step forward, then another. Ethan held his breath as the dog lowered his head and sniffed the food. For a long moment, he hesitated, but hunger eventually won. He ate in slow, deliberate bites, drinking some water before retreating a few steps. "Good boy," Ethan murmured. Still, as soon as he finished, the dog returned to his place, facing the ocean, waiting. Ethan knew this wasn't just another stray. This dog belonged to someone he still believed would return. Determined to find answers, Ethan started asking around. The vendors near the beach knew nothing about the dog's owner. The lifeguards had noticed him but assumed he was a local stray. The fisherman, who had been there since early morning, confirmed that the dog had been sitting in the same spot for over 3 days. One of them, an older man named Miguel, scratched his beard thoughtfully. "I don't know who he belongs to," Miguel said, "but I can tell you this. He's not waiting for just anyone." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Miguel sighed. "I've had dogs my whole life. When one waits like that, without moving, without losing hope, it's because he believes his person is coming back. No doubt in his heart, he's waiting for someone he loves." The word sent a chill down Ethan's spine. What if his owner wasn't coming back? And worse, what if the dog didn't know that yet? Ethan returned to the beach just before sunset, determined to gain the dog's trust. He sat a few feet away, allowing silence to settle between them. The waves crashed softly against the shore, a gentle rhythm filling the air. Then, out of nowhere, the dog let out a deep, low whimper. Ethan's chest tightened. The German Shepherd wasn't just waiting, he was mourning. Ethan had seen it before. He worked as a volunteer at an animal shelter, where abandoned dogs often cried for their owners, not understanding why they had been left behind. "Hey, it's okay," Ethan whispered. He extended his hand, palm up, letting the dog decide. For the first time, the German Shepherd turned away from the ocean, just for a second. It was brief, but Ethan knew this was a sign. The dog was beginning to trust him, and that meant there was still hope. Ethan had gained the first sliver of the German Shepherd's trust, but he knew this was just the beginning. The dog still refused to leave his spot on the beach, and his eyes continued searching the horizon. But something had changed. For the first time in days, he had acknowledged someone other than the waves. Ethan decided he wouldn't push him too hard. He sat nearby, letting the dog feel his presence, speaking to him in a calm, steady voice. "You know, I get it," he murmured. "I know what it's like to wait for someone who never comes back." The wind blew gently, lifting grains of sand across the beach. The dog's ears flicked at the sound of Ethan's voice, but he didn't turn his head. Ethan sighed. He had seen abandoned dogs before, but this one was different. His loyalty was unshakable. The German Shepherd still had hope. Ethan needed more information. He spent the next few hours checking the local shops, asking if anyone had seen the dog arrive, or if they knew of someone missing a German Shepherd. No one had answers. But then, just as he was about to give up, a teenage boy sitting on the boardwalk overheard his questions. "Hey, mister," the kid called out. "You talking about the dog down there?" Ethan turned.
"Yeah."
"Do you know anything about him?" The boy hesitated before nodding. "Sort of. I was here a few days ago. I think I saw what happened." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. "Tell me everything." The boy shifted uncomfortably. "It was like 3 nights ago. I was skating down the boardwalk when I saw this old car pull up near the dunes. The driver got out, opened the door, and the dog jumped out, all happy, wagging his tail and everything." Ethan clenched his jaw. He already knew where this was going. But then, the boy continued. The guy got back in the car. The dog tried to jump back in too, but the guy shoved him away. Ethan felt his stomach twist. The boy looked down at his sneakers as if ashamed. I didn't think it was real at first, you know? I thought maybe the guy was coming back. But he didn't. He just drove off, and the dog chased the car for a little bit, but then he stopped and just sat there." Ethan felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. He had been right. The dog wasn't lost. He had been abandoned. Ethan walked back to the beach, his hands balled into fists. He had seen cruelty before, but this kind of betrayal, it was the worst. The German Shepherd was still there, still waiting, still believing. Ethan sat down beside him and exhaled slowly. "He's not coming back, buddy," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "He left you." The dog didn't move. Ethan's throat tightened. "You deserve better." The German Shepherd blinked, his ears tilting slightly at the sound of Ethan's voice. He was listening, and for the first time he turned his head completely. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Ethan saw it, a tiny crack in the dog's unwavering hope. Maybe he didn't fully understand yet. Maybe some part of him still believed his owner would return, but another part, deep down, was beginning to accept the truth. Ethan swallowed hard and reached out slowly, letting his fingers graze the dog's fur. The German Shepherd didn't pull away. It was just a moment, just a brief touch, but it was enough. Ethan had broken through, and that meant for the first time in 3 days, the dog was finally willing to let someone in. That small act of trust felt monumental, like the first crack in a wall that had been built brick by brick over years of pain and abandonment. Ethan's heart ached as he realized how much this dog had endured. Not just the betrayal of being left behind, but the quiet, unyielding hope that kept him tethered to a spot on the beach, staring at an empty horizon. For the next few hours, Ethan stayed close, speaking softly, sharing stories about his own life, as if the dog were an old friend who needed to hear them. He talked about losses he'd faced, moments when he too had waited for something or someone who never came back. And though the dog couldn't understand the words, there was a connection forming, one deeper than language. By sunset, Ethan made a decision. "You're coming with me," he said firmly, his voice filled with resolve. The dog tilted his head slightly, his ears perking up at the tone. Ethan stood, extending his hand again, palm open, giving the dog the choice. After what felt like an eternity, the German Shepherd rose to his feet, hesitated for a moment, and then took a step forward. Then another. It wasn't perfect. He still glanced back toward the ocean, his body tense, torn between the past and whatever lay ahead. But Ethan gave him space, letting him set the pace. When they reached Ethan's truck, the dog stopped, his eyes flickering between the vehicle and the man beside him. Ethan patted the seat gently. "It's okay, buddy. You don't have to wait anymore." After what seemed like forever, the dog climbed into the truck, his movements cautious but deliberate. As Ethan shut the door and slid into the driver's seat, he noticed the dog's gaze shift from the window to the road ahead. For the first time in 4 days, those deep brown eyes weren't fixed on the past, they were looking forward. The ride home was silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of the dog shifting in the passenger seat. Ethan glanced over occasionally, his chest tightening every time he saw the dog's weary yet hopeful expression. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a second chance for both of them. Weeks passed, and the transformation was remarkable. The once gaunt German Shepherd now moved with energy and purpose. He wagged his tail more freely, greeted Ethan at the door each evening, and even started playing with toys, a sight Ethan hadn't expected so soon. Yet, despite all the progress, there were still moments when the dog would pause, his ears twitching as if listening for a sound that would never come. Those moments reminded Ethan of the scars loyalty could leave behind, the kind that don't fade entirely, no matter how much love or care you pour into healing them. One evening, as Ethan sat on the couch watching the dog stretch out contentedly on his bed, he found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. Freedom, that was the name Ethan had given him, was no longer waiting for someone who would never return. Instead, he had chosen to trust again, to embrace a new beginning. And in doing so, freedom had taught Ethan something profound. Loyalty is beautiful, but blind loyalty can break your heart. Sometimes holding on means letting go, not because you've given up, but because you deserve better. True strength lies not in waiting endlessly for someone unworthy, but in having the courage to walk away and find where you truly belong. As Ethan whispered, "Good night, buddy," and turned off the light, Freedom let out a soft sigh, his tail thumping against the floor. In that moment, Ethan realized the lesson wasn't just for the dog, it was for him, too. Life is full of betrayals, disappointments, and farewells, but it's also full of opportunities to start anew. All it takes is one brave step, and sometimes someone willing to extend their hand and say, "Come with me." Freedom's story became a testament to resilience, trust, and the power of second chances. It reminded everyone who heard it that while we may carry our past with us, we don't have to let them define us. Every ending holds the seed of a new beginning, if only we're brave enough to take it.